I feel like August was a pretty good reading month for me. I read so many good books. I even have a 5-star read in here, which is every reader's dream. I'm excited to share all the books that I read this month, so I'm not even going to bother with a long ass intro. We are just going to jump right in. Let's start off this video with a bang, and I'm going to share my 5-star read for August, which was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I absolutely loved this book. It will always have a special place in my heart from now on. I haven't watched the movie yet, but I definitely want to. A lot of you guys have told me that you watched the movie and that the movie actually was pretty amazing. So I am looking forward to watching it soon. But if you have never heard of Where the Crawdads Sing, how could you not? It's literally been all over the internet. It's basically about a young girl who was basically abandoned by her entire family at a super young age. She was left to fend for herself in the middle of a marsh. It's a coming of age story, but it also has a murder mystery in the plot, which makes it super entertaining. Someone very prominent in the town gets murdered. Automatically, everyone in the town suspects that the marsh girl did it. The book goes between past and the present, so you get to see Kaya grow up and essentially survive on her own. But then the book goes back to the present time where the murder investigation is happening. Honestly, there's a little bit of everything in this book. There's romance, so there's mystery. The writing is so beautiful. Your heart is just going to break for Kaya, and then the ending is going to be such a shocker. If you haven't read this book, please check it out. It's beautiful. The next book that I read was The Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa. This is actually the sequel to her first novel, which was The Worst Best Man. But that was actually one of the first books that I read that got me into rom-coms, and I absolutely loved it. This one is just as good as The Worst Best Man. It had everything that I loved about The Worst Best Man plus more. It had romance, it had comedy. Even though this one is the sequel to The Worst Best Man, it actually follows two different characters. It follows Dean and Solange, who I absolutely love. I love those two together. They just make the cutest couple, and they had like the best chemistry. Solange crashes Dean's wedding after she overhears the bride talking about the wedding, and Dean is a lawyer who is trying to make partner in his law firm. So when his wedding doesn't happen, his boss tries to pass him over for a opportunity to show that he can become a partner. Because of this, he enlists Solange's help to convince his boss that he's doing fine and that the cancellation of his wedding didn't destroy him. Like, he's still able to live and go to work. Solange agrees to fake date, and through fake dating they discover that they're super attracted to one another, but they both have life plans that are kind of pulling them in different directions. It's a really cute love story, really funny. I was actually laughing at certain parts of the book. One of the things I didn't really like about this book though was that Lena and Max from The Worst Best Man were kind of annoying in this book. They did make a few appearances, and every time they made an appearance I was just annoyed with them because they kept butting into Dean's and Solange's business. Dean and Solange are grown ass adults. They really didn't need anyone in their business, but there was Lena and Max getting in their business. Not a fan of them, but they did redeem themselves at the end. Another thing that I didn't really like about this book, and this comes down to preference, I didn't really like the spicy scenes. They're reading so many romance books. The spicy scenes are becoming repetitive. Like, it's the same scene in every book, and it's like, is it really necessary? Does it add anything to the book? That's just my personal opinion. I know that some people really love spicy books. Other than that, I really enjoyed this book and I highly recommend it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was almost a 5-star rating for me. The next book that I read was Hopeless by Colleen Hoover. I was just about to say Confess. I don't know why, but Hopeless by Colleen Hoover basically follows Dean and Sky. They have a connection from the very first day that they meet, but Sky actually wants to stay away from Dean because for some reason he reminds her of her past that she's trying to forget. But of course they can't stay away from each other, and there is a big revelation in this book that took me by complete surprise. It changed my thoughts on the book completely in a good way. It is so beautiful. I literally cried while reading this book. I loved Sky's personality. I loved her character. Dean had to grow on me, if I'm being honest. I feel like he had a few red flags that had me looking at him sideways. Like, I didn't completely trust him. Then I found out why he was that way, and I ended up liking him a lot. There is a book after this one called Losing Hope, which is from Dean's POV. I'm going to pick that up in the fall because I definitely want to read it. I feel like I'll understand more of Dean's character after I read that book, but I 100% recommend for you guys to check this book out. This is definitely one of my fave Colleen Hoover books. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. Definitely check out the triggers before you read this book because it does talk about some heavy topics that may be a trigger for some people. The next 2 books that I read are actually part of a series, and that is the Inheritance Games series. I read the first book, The Inheritance Games, and then the second book, The Hawthorne Legacy. These books are by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. If you haven't read the Inheritance Games series, it's basically about a 16-year-old girl, Avery, who has recently inherited a shit ton of money. A billionaire named Tobias Hawthorne basically left his entire fortune to her and only gave a small amount of money to his own family. But one of the conditions of his will is that Avery needs to move into the Hawthorne mansion and live there for a year in order to access her new fortune. The only problem is that the Hawthorne family lives there as well, and they're basically side-eyeing her and they don't trust her. They're really confused as to why their grandfather left her all his money, essentially. Really good series. I enjoyed reading these 2 books immensely. I will have to say that I enjoyed the second book a lot more than I enjoyed the first book, which I think is a unpopular opinion based on the reviews that I've been reading. A lot of people prefer the first book, but I don't know. I really like the second book a lot more because it involved more puzzles, and the mysteries didn't just involve Avery like it did in the first book. The mysteries actually involved the Hawthorne family as well as Avery. So I like that the mysteries expanded to the rest of the family. The only thing I didn't really enjoy about this series was the love triangle. And I just don't like the back and forth. Do I love him or do I love him? And this one involves a love triangle between Avery and 2 of the Hawthorne brothers. It's just weird to me how you can be attracted to 2 people that are not only family members, but they're brothers. I just can't get behind that. I'm sorry. If you love that type of drama in books, then this is a series for you. With all that being said, I am Team Grayson. I know that I just went on a rant saying that I don't like the romance element, but if I have to choose, I will choose Grayson. But other than that, I give this series a 4-star rating. The 3rd book in the series comes out at the end of this month, so I am going to read that one. It will definitely be a part of my September TBR. I did read another series this month, and that was the Folk of Air series by Holly Black. I read The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing. I didn't know that this fantasy series was primarily YA. I wish I had known that beforehand because I probably would have never picked it up for that reason. If you're unfamiliar with this fantasy series, it basically follows Jude, who was 7 when her parents were murdered by a fairy. I think that's what you call them, fairy. Correct me if I'm wrong. But her family was murdered and her and her sisters were taken to live in a high court of fairy. Flash forward 10 years later, Jude wants nothing more than to belong in the high court and to be part of the Fae. The Fae doesn't take her or her sisters seriously because they're humans and they view humans as weak creatures. But Jude just wants to be a part of them, and she wants to prove to them that she can be just as strong and just as powerful as them, which leads her down to a very dangerous path. I rated each book a 3-star rating. I definitely give the entire series a 3-star rating as well. I was not a fan of any of the characters, if I'm being honest. I didn't really like Jude. She was just so obsessed with power, which led her to make so many stupid decisions, and then she was just so careless at times with other people and other characters that I was just like, can you just shut up for 1 minute? I feel like if the other books didn't have her POV, then I would have liked her a little bit more, but as I was reading her point of view, I just kept getting more and more annoyed with her. And then I found that the first book was really slow, which is understandable because the first book in a fantasy series tends to be really slow because there's a lot of world building, but the second and third book were just as slow in my opinion. I will say that the second and third book did have better endings. Like the second book ended in a huge cliffhanger, and then the third book, The Queen of Nothing, had a very wholesome ending that actually made me smile. But other than that, not a huge fan of this. I will only recommend this series if you're like into YA fantasy, or if you've never read fantasy before, then this might be a good start for you because the books aren't all that thick. And I know that a lot of people get intimidated by fantasy books because the size of them, but this one just didn't do it for me, if I'm being honest. I was expecting a lot more, especially since so many people raves about it, that I was kind of just let down as I was reading it. All right, the next book that I read was Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. This book basically follows 17-year-old pirate captain Alosa, who allows herself to be captured by her enemies in order to find a hidden treasure map that they have a part of. And throughout the book, you basically see her struggles of trying to find the treasure map while being imprisoned by her enemies. I just loved Alosa's character. She was so stubborn, she was so strong. I loved her sense of humor. And then I also loved the second character in this book, Ridden, who's supposed to be like Alosa's love interest. If you enjoyed the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, I feel like you will really enjoy this book. It is the first book of a series, which I plan to read the second book in September. And I just really enjoyed this book so much. It was actually pretty funny in certain parts as well. I read this during a 24-hour reading challenge, and it definitely kept me awake because it was so entertaining that I didn't want to put it down. It's such a fun, cute little read. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read, finally, was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This book basically follows Alex and Poppy, who once upon a time were best friends that used to go on summer vacations every summer, but something happens that destroys their friendship and they actually stop speaking to one another for 2 years. One day, Poppy basically realizes that she is not happy in her life, and the reason that she's not happy is because she misses her best friend Alex. So she sets out to go on one last summer vacation with Alex to try to fix their friendship. It is friends to lovers, which I recently decided that I am not a fan of. And then when I found out why they stopped talking to one another for 2 years, it was such a disappointment. You guys are supposed to be like the best friends, friends that tell everything to one another, and that one little thing caused you guys to not speak for 2 years and to basically forget about each other for 2 years. That kind of just ruined the entire book for me. With that being said, I really loved the main characters in this book. Like, I absolutely loved Poppy. I loved her sense of humor. I loved her personality. She was so outgoing, so bubbly. She just wanted to have fun. I also really loved Alex. I loved that he was like the polar opposite from Poppy, but somehow they worked well together. So I loved the characters. I just didn't love the story. In my opinion, Beach Read is way better than People Meet on Vacation, but you know what? Everyone's going to have their own opinion. Again, if you like friends to lovers, then definitely check out this book. If you're not really into the friends to lovers trope, then maybe sit this one out because I don't think you're going to like it all that much. So even though I didn't love Poppy's and Alex love story, I still gave this a 4 out of 5 because I really enjoyed the characters and I love Emily Henry. So I'm going to let this one pass. But if she comes out with another friends to lovers book, I probably won't read it, if I'm being honest. The next book that I read was The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. This one basically follows two main characters, Anna and Quan. Anna is fresh from a breakup. Well, her boyfriend wants a open relationship and she really doesn't. So she convinces herself to go on a string of one-night stands. But the first one-night stand that she picks happens to be Quan, and they end up not being a one-night stand. Throughout them trying to have a one-night stand, Quan realizes that he actually doesn't want to be Anna's one-night stand. Like, he actually wants to have a serious relationship with her. What I really like about this book is that Anna is actually autistic, and this is actually the third book in a series by Helen Huang where all her main characters have autism. And I've said this before, but I really love that Helen Huang writes stories and books where the main character is autistic because they definitely need more representation in books. And I really like that this book didn't just involve romance, it also involved a lot of like important life issues and problems like depression and grief, feeling like you're not enough, feeling like you have to pretend to be someone that you're not. With that being said, I do wish that I saw more of Kwan's character because I loved Kwan, and this book definitely focused more on Anna and her struggles. I gave it a 4-star rating. I did take a break from romance this month and I picked up a horror book. I read The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. If you don't know what a final girl is basically the sole survivor in a horror film, and this book basically follows a support support group of final girls who are actually being targeted by a serial killer that wants to take them down once and for all. It is told by just one final girl's POV, and her name was Lynette. Even though I enjoyed this book, I definitely don't think it's for everyone. I think that some people are going to love it and some people are going to hate it. It is a little bit slow at the beginning, but then it picks up. If you're into horror movies, I feel like you'll really appreciate this book because the author did a really good job in incorporating a lot of things from very famous horror movies like Scream, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th. So if you love those movies, I feel like you can really appreciate this book for what it is. And I really enjoyed that it had so many twists that I did not see coming, as well as the horror movie references sprinkled throughout. I didn't love the ending, but it was a pretty unique ending, so I can appreciate it. And I definitely think it's a great book to read in the fall. And I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This book basically follows Naomi, who, after receiving a very troubling letter from her cousin, decides to visit her and figure out what's going on with her cousin and her cousin's new husband. After arriving to her cousin's new house, she realizes that her cousin's husband's family is really weird, and throughout the book she starts uncovering very dark family secrets that she has to figure out if she wants to be a part of, or if she can somehow escape this crazy ass house and its family members with her cousin, or if she'll have to leave her behind. This is the first book that I've ever read from the gothic horror genre, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was a bit slow in the beginning, but I feel like most horror and thriller books are typically slow in the beginning, at least the few that I've read so far, but it definitely picks up in the second half of the book. I absolutely love the author's writing in this book. It was 10 out of 10. She made me fall in love with all the characters, even the villains. I will say that the twist was quite predictable. I was able to predict the twist halfway through the book, but even though I was able to predict the ending and the twist, I will say that I still enjoyed the book, mainly because of the author's writing. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely recommend for you guys to check out this book, especially in the fall. It's going to give you the horror vibes that you need. I don't necessarily think it's a scary book. I think it's more of a like suspense thriller, but it does have a lot of gothic horror tropes if you do enjoy that type of thing. The final 2 books that I read this month, I read on my phone on the Kindle app, and the first one was The Perfect Marriage by Genevieve Rose. It basically follows a married couple. Sarah is a really successful defense lawyer. Adam is not as successful as his wife. He is a struggling writer who is in the midst of struggling to write his next book. Sarah is constantly working. Adam is not. As a result, he decides to have an affair with another married woman. One night after cheating on his wife with this woman, the woman ends up dead. And the police think that Adam is the murderer because the murder happened in his lake home, but he is adamant that he's innocent. Despite the fact that her husband was cheating on her, Sarah decides to defend Adam and becomes his defense attorney. What I really liked about this book is that you get both Sarah's and Adam's point of view, so you get to see how each character is dealing with this murder investigation in their own way. Like, obviously Sarah is struggling because she's defending her husband who she just found out was cheating on her, but she also doesn't want to see him go to prison for a crime that he didn't commit. And then you get Adam's point of view of trying to prove his innocence while still trying to prove that he actually loves Sarah and he wants her to forgive him. The twist at the end was one that I did not see coming. It took me in for such a loop. I was shocked while I was reading the ending. The ending definitely made me love the book 100 times more. Like, I already enjoyed the book, but the ending just sealed the deal for me. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It's definitely a thriller that you won't be able to put down. It's a great book for the fall as well, so definitely check out The Perfect Marriage. And if you have Amazon Prime, it's actually free to read on the Kindle app, so definitely check it out because you're not going to regret it, I promise you. One thing to note is that a lot of the things that happen in this book are super unrealistic, but if you can see past that, then I think you'll really enjoy the book. The last book that I read this month was Sold on a Monday by Christina McMorris. This book was actually inspired by a photograph that was taken in real life of a child being sold, which is crazy that that actually happened in real life. It happened during the 1930s, during the Great Depression, but this book basically follows the photographer who took that picture. I was expecting to read more about the children in that picture, but this book turned out to be more about the photographer. For that reason, I only gave it a 3 out of 5 5-star rating because again, I was expecting to read more about the children and to see where they ended up, and this book was definitely not that. It was also very slow at the beginning. Towards the second half, it definitely picked up, but it took me a while to actually get into the book and to actually enjoy it. So definitely keep that in mind. It's not a book that is going to have you at the edge of your seat. It's a historical fiction book, so there is a lot of slow build-up, and at the end everything came full circle, which made the book worth it for me. And this is another book that is free if you have Amazon Prime. You can read it on your phone or on your Kindle. My camera is literally about to die, so those are all the books that I read this month. Let me know in the comments below if you have read any of the books that I mentioned in today's video. Also, please leave some good fall book recommendations in the comments below. And that is pretty much it for today's video. Really hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I would love to have you a part of my little community here on YouTube, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.